I call to order the regular City Council meeting for Monday, November 18th, 2024 at 5:30 p.m. At this time, I would ask you to please silence your cell phones or put them on vibrate as to limit interruptions. Moving on to the agenda, let's move on to item number 1, and that's the roll call.
Blessum.
Here.
Fuller.
Here.
Janser.
Here.
Olson. Pittner.
Here.
Ross.
Here.
Samuelson.
Item 2, Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Moving on to item number 3, the mayor's report. I've got a kind of a little bit of a lengthy one, and I've got a couple of proclamations I'd like to read, but I'll start off with the proclamations. The mayor proclaims November 17th to the 23rd as Hunger and Homelessness Awareness Week. Whereas hunger and homelessness continue to be real-life issues for individuals and families in Minot, across North Dakota, and throughout the United States and around the world. And whereas food insecurity, housing instability, and homelessness impact many North Dakota residents, including many in our own community, as safe, affordable housing and healthy, nutritious meals are vital but all too often elusive aspects of everyday life for residents of Minot and North Dakota. And whereas all North Dakotans are encouraged to develop an understanding of issues surrounding safe and affordable housing and food insecurity, and recognize that people do not possess the very basic necessities of life, such as shelter, food, and clothing. And whereas government agencies, nonprofit organizations, housing providers, businesses, and individuals must continue to collaborate and partner to provide access to these basic necessities to ensure a brighter, safer, and healthier future for all North Dakotans. Now, therefore, do I, Tom Ross, Mayor of Minot, hereby designate November 17th to the 23rd, 2024 as Hunger and Homeless Awareness Week, and encourage all Minot residents to support private and nonprofit organizations that confront the issues of hunger and homelessness in our community and continue to embrace those affected by these issues through donations of time, talent, and treasures in order to make Minot a more resilient and welcoming community for our residents. The mayor proclaims November 17th to 23rd as Hunger and Homelessness Awareness Week, signed by myself and Clerk Michaela McWilliams. And also, the mayor proclaims November 21st as Family Engagement Day. Whereas the city of Minot and the state of North Dakota are fully committed to excellence in education and recognize the importance of family engagement in the pursuit of those standards. And whereas families have for generations provided a critical foundation for their children to learn and grow into successful adults through the engagement between families and school staff members as we work towards the common goal of educating our youth. And whereas North Dakota's heritage and values expressed by its people are rooted in families, and engagement of pioneer families was vital to the early development of an outstanding public education system in our state. And whereas families in Minot and across North Dakota are the first and most influential teachers of our children, and partnering with families increases our ability to improve student outcomes and meet the needs of our children through cooperation and collaboration. Now, therefore do I, Tom Ross, Mayor of Minot, hereby designate November 21st, 2024 as Family Engagement Day, and encourage all Minot and North Dakota residents to reinforce and strengthen the partnerships, families, and our school systems as we work to ensure that future generations are taught the values that are rooted in the heritage of our state, in the successful education of our families. And that is signed by myself and City Clerk Caleb McWilliams. Moving on to just a few meetings. Over the last couple weeks, I did have meetings with Senator Hoven and Undersecretary of the Air Force, Dr. William LaPlante. The topic of discussion was the Sentinel project, among other base-focused issues. I did take part in as a civic leader to watch the Global Thunder exercise. We did the ribbon cutting at the new dome at Minot Air Force Base, which is a wonderful addition to the airmen out there. Also took part in the 91st and 5th Bomb Wings, 91st Missile Wing and 5th Bomb Wings third quarter award ceremonies. Handed out mayor certificates to the award winners. Also spoke to Dakota Elementary. Took part in a Veterans Day program at North Plains. We had a Task Force 21 meeting, Chamber Board meeting. Also participated in an off-site training program for Minot Air Force Base officers. That was held at Minot State University. Also attended the MSU Senior Day football game. Got to give a shout out to the Minot State women's soccer. I know they just came up short, but they represented us well in the conference championship, so congratulations to them. Took part in the Military Affairs Committee, the Child Care Committee, Economic Review Plan Review Committee, Alcohol Ordinance Review Committee. We had a joint meeting. We had a special meeting and a joint meeting, and dinner with Brigadier General Mark Ritchie. I also, at this time, because the mayor's only a part-time job, after I say all this, mayor's only a part-time job, I am the workforce development coordinator for our local Job Corps, Burdick Job Corps Center in town. And one of the programs we have at Burdick Job Corps it's called work-based learning. And before any student graduates through the program, they have to take part in 40 hours of work-based learning. And we were fortunate enough, and it's the last day for this fine young gentleman. He was an immediate impact when he came and joined Michaela here in the city clerk's office. And he's one of the shining stars of the Burdick Job Corps Center. And I just would like to recognize Gabriel Lima, who is with us here tonight. So Gabriel, if you want to step forward, I got a special gift for you. More than a few times that Michaela said that she was going to chain you down and keep you here, but we thank you for your service. And are there any questions of my report? Seeing none, we will move on to item number 3 on the agenda, or item number 4 on the agenda. That's the city manager's report.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, great to be with you again this evening. I guess first and foremost, I would entertain any questions the council may have with regards to the memo that's been prepared.
Are there any questions of the city manager?
If not, it's the second meeting of the month, so we have a brief presentation from finance. And when Jenna has concluded her presentation, I would like to turn some time over to Captain Plessis, who has some police department appreciation to express.
I'll keep it brief then. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. So you get to speak to me this month for the finance presentation, and it's not going to be in a PowerPoint. It's actually showing you what we have coined department dashboards. So this is an initiative that I have taken on in the last couple weeks to tailor budget dashboards and different modules within our ERP system to help departments monitor their budgets and keep track of activities, whether it's contracts or purchase orders in that regard. So this is kind of what they look like. This is actually what Dave and I's will look like. So it's a very high-level summary for all departments, but you can expand it if you are well-versed in the pivot chart or pivot tables within Excel. This is what it's kind of built off of. So our goal is to have these out to departments this week. We've actually met with probably half of them, and then we're meeting with the rest of them later on this week. So this is what some of them will get a little preview of what they'll learn in their meetings this week. So just wanted to give you a brief overview of what these are. So this is just our budget one. So it's very high level. You can expand into different departments and orgs and see original budget, revise their current year-to-date actuals, any encumbrances that are tied up in a contract or a purchase order, and then their available budget as of a point in time. So that point in time is as of today. It's not perfect real time, but it's updated overnight every night. So it's at least kind of closer to that real time data so that departments can see it at a glance. That's kind of all I have for you, unless you have any specific questions on it.
Mike?
Yep. Thanks, Jenna. This is great. Can you scroll down to the bottom for me?
Sure.
We get to a total. Okay, just one quick question. So the number we're seeing at the bottom, 70.18, is sort of year to date, but that's 70.18 of the total budget for the year. So that's not what we're expecting to spend through today. That's what we were expecting to spend through the end of the year. Is that right?
Well, this is as of today, technically. So
For
we're 70%
actuals.
of our 100% budget. And I will caveat that this doesn't include our capital project funds, so that like 400 level fund, capital infrastructure, equipment, and flood control. This is more operating for those higher level department heads.
And so my point is, though, we shouldn't expect to get to the end of December and still be at 70, because we've
Correct.
still got over a month left. So that really gets to the main question that I did have. Is it, in my mind, it makes more sense to see, okay, let's say we're looking at through October 31, to see like a 10+2 budget plus, projection or whatever that would be. I think this is fabulous, and I think it's really good for us to be able to see this. There's just that little bit of a disconnect in my mind, where the fact that we're at 70 means, in my mind, we should come in well under budget, is the way that I'm thinking of it. But we also don't know what's still coming, right?
Yes.
And that's the timing issue we would have with doing maybe what I'm suggesting. Does that make sense?
That's correct. And Alderman Blessum, to your point, this is a point in time, yes, but it's also, we have a lot of year-end accruals that still have to hit. So we're kind of in that awkward time period of the year where, some payroll accruals haven't hit. So there's a lot of different things that are in limbo that might not be reflecting in these numbers.
And then if I can continue, Mr. Mayor, so then just really quickly, is this something that we'll have access to, that we'll be able to see, and is it kept up? Doesn't have to be daily, but is it kept up monthly or however often you guys are doing it?
Alderman Blessum, this is actually something that just auto feeds from our system, so I don't have to manually manipulate these numbers. And great question, because that's where I'm leading. So I would love for this to be now displayed on our public-facing website on the finance piece. It's a goal that I've had to update that webpage. If you've seen it, it's very, here's our budget book, here's our ACFR. It's very not really user-friendly and doesn't really give you meaningful data. So that's something that's on my to-do list in the next, hopefully, year to get it a little bit more meaningful data out there. And this is one of the things that I would love to have out there, and it's updated every night.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Thank you, Jenna.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Oh, Dale, yes.
Mayor Ross and members of the City Council, City Manager Stewart, thank you for giving me a couple of minutes to say thank you to some of the organizations and people who really supported us last week during our efforts to properly honor our fallen officer, Mitch Watney. I asked the city manager just to give me a couple of minutes to thank a few of the people and organizations. I know I can't be all-inclusive. There's not enough time in this meeting, and I would leave somebody out because my memory's not that great. But at least I can thank some of the people who helped us, and we'll try to put out a more inclusive list on our social media site, and we're also intending to put some letters out in the mail to say thank you to people who really went the extra mile. First of all, I just want to say the city of Minot really has a great family internally, and it was really proven to us at the police department during this incident. You never want something like this to happen, but when it does, you really see how close of a family you have. And so, first of all, I wanted to thank the city department heads. They provided meals to all of our officers, not just the ones who were working during the day. They actually bought Jimmy John's, sent those to the police department, and they bought Olive Garden. In the middle of the night, Michaela brought all those meals to the officers. So our night shift got meals, our day shift, our afternoon shift, everybody. So I can't thank you guys enough for all that. And they're all here today, so that's kind of nice. City manager Harold Stewart made sure that we were all fed after the funeral. I can't tell you how many people were there, but I can tell you there are a lot of people at the police department, and he provided pulled pork and smoked beans, and along with Dean from Homesteaders, Dean Aberly from Homesteaders with some salads. they provided meals, so after the funeral, all of our officers had a safe place to eat. And something that we don't normally see is he showed up afterwards to clean up, which is really nice. Anna Schrader, the city manager's administrative assistant, was critical in getting all these things done as well. I got to thank Chief Kelly from the Minot Fire Department specifically, because not only did they bring us some baskets and food, but they also helped us with traffic control during our procession, which was a big area of assistance. The PIO team for the city of Minot went above and beyond their normal duty. They actually provided a video at the end of all of this on their own time that really put together for the family how much the city of Minot appreciated their son. So I can't thank them enough. Jen Clean, T, Quigney, Brian Obenchain, thank you for all that. I want to make sure I also thank some of our partners in the region. Ward County Sheriff's Department, Sheriff Rude organized a group of officers who are deputies who actually came and patrolled the city streets, because during the funeral, it's kind of difficult to have officers who are going to attend the funeral, stay up all night, go to the funeral all day, and then come back the next day. So at 3 a.m. in the morning, the Sheriff's Department took over patrol for the city of Minot. They did that with the assistance of McLean County Sheriff's Department and McHenry County Sheriff's Department and the North Dakota Highway Patrol. Sheriff Rude organized all this, got all these groups together, and they did a great job of making sure the citizens of Minot were safe during that time. The Highway Patrol also provided security for the funeral, which is something you don't think about, but in today's day and age, it's necessary, so that was really nice as well. Members of our family from the Minot Air Force Base also came down and provided intersection security for the procession. We had members of the 891st, MSFS, the 219th SFS, and the 5th SFS come down and actually take intersections and help move traffic through so that our procession could come through. Minot Rural Fire Department did the same thing. Chief Rex Walticall provided assistance from the Rural Fire Department. Got to thank Gary Orlick and Minot State University. They provided parking for the funeral. Then members of the Grand Forks PD, Fargo PD, and Department of Corrections all sent honor guard members down. American Legion provided rifles and ammunition for the 21 gun salute, so we have to say thank you to them as well. I mean, that was beautiful. I just want to finish off by thanking the citizens of Minot, because I know it was a difficult time, but I didn't hear a single complaint about the disruption of traffic or anything. It just goes to show how much the citizens of Minot really appreciate the police department and officers who protect them, and they were great to come out and honor Mitch Watney. So we really appreciated that. Like I said, not all inclusive list, but I wanted to make sure I thanked a couple of groups. I was an enormous amount of support. I received support from virtually all the city council members during the following days, and members from throughout the city, and I can't tell you how much that meant. It meant a lot to the department, so thank you for that.
Thank you, Dale. Okay.
Mayor?
Yes,
Before we
Mike.
move on, could I?
Yep.
I'm sorry to, come out of that. It's hard to go back to regular business, but Harold, we're still in your report. I do have a question on the, in your report, we have the MACD EDC report in there. And we're going to talk about that contract in a little while. One of the things that came to my mind as we look at that is the business retention and expansion summary. And I'm wondering, because it seems like there's a lot of great info in there. Is that something, what can we do to more effectively utilize that data? As I look at it, and we're seeing numbers coming back telling us that our cost of living, uncompetitive tax rates, and labor costs are big barriers to growth, at least to this test group. How can we more effectively use that information, whether it's us, whether it's the city organization itself? What can we do with that information?
Mr. Mayor, Alderman Blessing, that's a great question. I think the main thing is just that is designed to be data that comes to us that we as a city, whether it's you as elected officials or we as appointed staff, can look at and see if there's ways that we can assist in those areas. Particularly, I think it would be an imperative for myself and Mr. Billingsley, our Community Development and Economic Development Director, to review over those materials and see what there is that we can change or do better with regards to that. I think it would be great for the Economic Development Policy Committee to review over some of that and use that as a platform of areas that we can improve, whether that's in providing infrastructure, whether it's maybe improving regulations to be better. Some of those things the city may or may not have a role in being a solution to the answer, but identifying those things that we can play a role in and where we should play a role in, and talk through some of those kinds of things. So it's kind of a comprehensive approach and answer, but I think the more important thing is that we continue to get that data, that we partner with MACDC. Those business retention expansion interviews are critical. They've been critical in other communities that I've served in as well, to continue to provide and foster an economic environment where they can succeed and thrive, whether they're already here and they want to grow, whether they're struggling, where can we assist, or if it's an organization that's looking at potentially locating to our community, that data and information serves multiple perspectives.
Thanks.
Mike, is that something that maybe Mark from the chamber, I see Mark Lyman is here. Do you want more information on that? Is that something you want Mark to address from their viewpoint?
No,
or-
I think as far as tonight goes, I think Harold's got it exactly right. We've got the committee spun up and we're continuing that process, and it just happened that it hit now, and I knew that these reviews were integral to what we need going forward. Just want to make sure we had a little discussion tonight, so I appreciate that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Okay. Any other questions or comments on the city manager's report? Seeing none, we will move on to the item 5, and that's the Planning Commission. Item 5.2, public hearing, case number 2024-09-02, zoning map amendment, future land use amendment, Ingers First Edition. Now is the time for those who wish to speak in favor of or against the zoning map amendment to step forward. Second call for those who wish to speak in favor of or against. Seeing none, what are the wishes of the council?
I would move approval, Mr. Mayor, and accept the Planning Commission's recommendations.
A move to close the public
Close the
hearing.
public hearing and move the Planning Commission's recommendations.
We have a motion. Is there a second? Second by Paul. Discussion. Any discussion? Seeing none, please record your vote.
The motion passed unanimously.
Moving on to item 5.3, public hearing case 2024-09-03, preliminary plat, Carver Edition. Now is the opportunity for those who wish to speak in favor of or against the preliminary plat. Second call for those who wish to speak in favor of or against the item. Seeing no movement, what are the wishes of the council?
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing and approve.
We have a motion by Rob, second by Paul. Further discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, please record your vote.
Motion passed unanimously.
Moving on to item 5.4, public hearing case 2024-09-05, zoning map amendment, preliminary plat, annexation of Gerald first edition. Now is the opportunity for those who wish to speak in favor of or against the action to come forward. Second call. Seeing none, what are the wishes of the council?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Mark.
I move we close the public hearing and approve the item.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Scott. Further discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, please record your vote.
Motion passed unanimously.
Moving on to action item 6, the consent items. We have 17 items on our consent agenda for this evening. I've been asked to pull items 6.11, 6.14, and 6.17. Are there any other items to be pulled? Any other items to be pulled? Seeing none, what are the wishes of the council?
Move approval on the remaining items.
Second.
We have a motion by Paul, a second by Mike. For any further discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, please record your vote.
Motion passed unanimously.
Moving on to item 6.11, the approved job description for contract compliance officer and coordinator. What are the wishes of the council?
Mr. Mayor, I would move approval.
We have a motion by Mike, a second by Paul. Alderman Blessam, you asked to have this motion pulled,
Yep.
this action item pulled, so I'll let you take the lead.
All right, thank you. So Dave, thanks for coming up. One of the things that caught my eye, and you know, we had a conversation about this. One of the things I was a little concerned about as I did end up seeing it was it almost felt like the memo was written that we're almost done with the work that this job was meant to do. And I realize that's why we're transitioning, but I just want to be a little bit cognizant of the idea that we're not inventing additional work because that work ran out. And so, you know, the original thought process was we got to make sure we're in compliance with all of these different strings that were coming from the federal programs. Felt like it was winding down just a little bit, but I know that there's thought for where this is headed and other work that will be completed. So I thought we'd get some feedback on that.
Mr. Mayor, Alderman Blessam, the work will continue. As we approach closeout on these grants, we'll be closing them out, and that means there won't be any funding left in those grants, but the monitoring work will continue for the next 20-plus years to make sure that the city remains in compliance with the requirements of the agreements under those grants. So along with it, and we will still continue to have other federal funds available through the entitlement program as well. However, the administrative money that will be available to cover salaries in the entitlement plans won't be enough to cover both of these positions. So there's still going to be work. The job description or the job person will be needed. We just wanted to change that description a little bit to make it more broad, to handle all types of contracts within the city instead of focusing on just grant-related work.
Okay. So if I can continue, Mr. Mayor, so Dave, does that mean that there's work right now that's spread across maybe multiple employees that are handling that kind of stuff right now? It's going to consolidate that, make sure we're staying on top of those and keeping ourselves in a good spot?
Mr. Mayor, Alderman Blessam, that's correct. We're decentralized in how the contracts are handled. So each department's tasked with maintaining their contracts and ensuring that they're on top of them when it's time to renew these contracts. And because it's so decentralized, it's very difficult to keep track of everything. So that's an effort to centralize this workload. So we make sure that we're able to keep track of, you know, when things are expiring, when they need to be redone. So we don't end up with a scenario where it's a mad dash at the deadline to get something in front of the council to get approved. And then to make sure that we're still in compliance or that the people that we have contracts with are complying to the terms of the agreements as well.
Any other questions of Dave? Thank you, Dave. We have a motion and a second on the floor. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, please record your vote.
Motion passed unanimously.
On to item under the consent agenda, item 6.14, Septage Receiving Station Feasibility Assessment. What are the wishes of the council?
I'll make a motion to approve.
We have a motion by Rob. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mark. Rob, you asked to have this one pulled, so I'll let you take the lead on this one.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess just a couple questions. Maybe Jason, if you could step up, I'm going to pick on you for a minute. So in the project funding, it says that we had approved $225,000 in the 2024 sewer department budget. The $26,000 that we're asking for here, is that coming out of there?
Mr. Mayor, Alderman Fuller, yes.
Okay, and then the remaining 199,000 or whatever it is that just for the assessment or to figure out if we can do this or not, or is that the total project cost?
Mr. Mayor, Alderman Fuller, so basically, we had put the money in not knowing exactly what one of these receiving stations costs. So the 250 was kind of a placeholder. So working with our consultant, they recommended that we do this feasibility assessment. So we'll go through that exercise, we'll get a report, and basically there'll be some real high-level estimates along with some high-level site plans of locations that would work, wouldn't work, and pros and cons of those. But after that 26,000 is spent, basically that money would go back into reserves, and then we would come back and ask you all for, if we wanted to build one of these, we would come back and ask for funding at a different time.
Okay. So I guess my question, we've talked a lot since I've been on city council about surveys and studies and all the money we put into them. Is there nobody within our city or in our department that could figure out if we can do one of these special facilities and where it would go and what equipment would cost?
Mayor Ross, Alderman Fuller, so, when you look at a contract like this, $26,000, it probably represents probably about 130 hours worth of work by a consultant. We just don't have the bandwidth, time-wise, internally to dedicate that kind of time. And then Apex Engineering, who they do our general wastewater contracting, they're experts in this field. They know the equipment. They've constructed a couple of these in different parts of the state. So we're just relying on their expertise to kind of streamline that studying too. So we're not starting from scratch, not knowing much of anything about it. So,
Okay, thank you.
yeah.
Any other questions? Yep. Yes,
Just
ma'am.
real quick, Jason. So the way that you just described that, we'll get a sort of a high-level idea, high-level estimate. So do we then also pay once we go and do actual design and actual layout and all those things? So it's kind of a phased approach we're going to go through?
Mayor Ross, Alderman Blessum, yeah. So this would be almost like a preliminary design, pre-design, and then this would kick off the final design then something that we would take out for bids.
Okay. And then just a more general question, the way we do it today, is that the only real option that we have in the city, not necessarily a city organization, but really anywhere for these haulers to dump? Is that the only place they can go?
Yeah, Mayor Ross, Alderman Blessum, that's correct. And then we do it, it's really in close proximity to our office, which is kind of interesting with odors and some things. So we have to be cognizant of where we would locate this. We want to make sure it's kind of close so we can monitor it. But once we look at building one of these more automated facilities, we could look at getting it, out onto the outskirts of town or some of those different ideas as well. But yeah, to my knowledge, I don't know that there's any other communities that accept this septage like we do.
Okay. And then the other part of it is, it sounds like most of this is happening because those haulers can't control what ends up in their stream. And I guess it seems to me that a method to hold them accountable for what they're putting into our stream would seem to at least be a parallel thing that we ought to be doing. Because if somebody's throwing their shoe in a porta potty and it gums up our equipment at some point in my mind, that's on the hauler. Asking them to sift through their own stuff. I don't know how you do that, but
That's the difficult part, right?
Yeah.
They go in there with a sucker hose and just suck up whatever's in the porta potty, and then when they dump it, they just open a valve and turn on the pump and it pumps it into a manhole. So we're really not able to monitor it or pick through it, and that's basically what this septage receiving station would do. It would have different stages of screening out bigger particles, smaller particles, and then a grinder at the end that would basically compact it and put into a garbage can that we can then haul away. So this receiving station would kind of do what you would hope that a hauler would do, but doesn't have the ability to do. So
So if I can continue, just one last thing then, Jason, do we charge for them to dump? Is
Yeah.
there a fee?
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
and that's something that we should probably, I would expect that we would look at if we go through the process of building one of these to make sure that we're charging enough to somewhat pay back on this unit. So
I guess I would say if we're willing to say to them, hey, send whatever the heck through you're gonna pull out, then it ought to be a relatively hefty charge to be able to dump that.
yeah,
Would be my
definitely.
thought.
Yeah.
Any other questions of Jason? Thank you, Jason. Any further discussion? We have a motion and a second. Seeing no further discussion, please record your vote.
Motion passed unanimously.
There were so many jokes with that last action item, I just wanted to throw that out there. Moving on to item 6.17 on the under the consent. Mouse River Enhanced Flood Protection Phase Velva-1 Velva Bridge Replacement. What are the wishes of the council?
I'll make a motion to approve.
We have a motion by Rob, a second by Paul. And once again, Rob, you asked to have this pulled, so you can take the mic.
Thank you. Appreciate you coming back up, Jason.
Read your mind.
So I got some questions. So it looks like total estimated cost and engineering is about $9.3 million on this bridge. Does that sound right?
Yep.
Okay. Where is this bridge located?
I would have to, I think it's on right in the city of Velva,
Okay.
because the Souris River, I think, makes kind of a loop through Velva.
So where you turn north basically on the main street and just head out that bridge that you cross before you come up to Highway 2?
I believe that's the one.
Okay. So our share of this, it looks like it's about $3.72 million. Has Velva chipped in any or McHenry County at all?
Mayor Ross, Alderman Fuller, no. The McHenry County may have.
Okay.
I'd have to go back and look. But yeah, this goes back to the basin-wide approach that the whole Souris River flood control project is built around, is that Minot is the cost share for all the other projects.
I understand that, but I mean, we're replacing a bridge in Velva, North Dakota that's downstream from anything we're doing at a cost of $9.4 million, which our share is 3.72, and Velva doesn't have to give anything, or McHenry County isn't doing anything. Why are we obligated to repair or replace that bridge?
Mayor Ross, Alderman Fuller, so it goes back somewhat to some of the history that I believe Ryan Ackerman and I discussed with the new council when you guys come on board. Back in the 70s when we were looking at building flood control, the Burlington Dam, was the example that got up, and it created this environment where you pitted rural against urban. The city of Minot needed flood control, and then, the attitude back then was the heck with the rural folks. So to avoid that opposition, this was, this was a program that was put in place where the city of Minot is the funding partner for this entire project to avoid some of that stuff.
Okay, well, I mean, it's a great deal for the city of Velva and McHenry County, not so much for us and the residents of Minot. I guess I don't understand, as a council, why are we, I understand the flood control portion of it, but why are we tied to all these other communities and paying for their flood control and their issues as well? So, thank you, Jason. I appreciate it.
Mr. Mayor?
Lisa?
Jason, come back, please. Thank you. So just for clarification, in response to Alderman Fuller's concerns, have we been the recipients of the federal funds to help offset some of that?
Yeah, Mayor Ross, Alderwoman Olson, that is correct. Since the Souris River Joint Board is the ultimate project sponsor, they get the cost share from the state is to them, and then the city of Minot is the local sponsor for the other projects.
And so would the city of Velva or McHenry County received any of those funds?
I don't believe so.
Okay, thank you.
So Jason, just to clarify what Alderwoman Olson was asking though, regardless of any of that, I understand that that is how the money flowed in. Minot's portion is still Minot's portion. It's still coming from our sales tax. Now, you could make the case, and I think maybe this is part of that as well. The residents of Velva likely are paying Minot sales tax when they're in town. So if they're coming into a restaurant, if they're buying goods. So I think that part of the case can make sense, that they are actually paying some of that sales tax.
Yeah, that's correct.
I do share some of Alderman Fuller's concerns here though, and I realize that, as you just mentioned, we're going back to sort of handshake agreements or agreeing to disagree that goes all the way back into the 70s. And so, you know, I'll just reiterate what I always do, and that the people of Minot are strapped, and they're being asked to foot this bill again. And this isn't to build, it's not to build flood walls out there. It's not to build any of that. It's to replace their bridge. And I realize that it's all part of the same thought process, and the joint board is doing that. But it's a big lift for the people to be asked to shoulder again.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the city of Minot is involved in 2 massive regional projects, NAS and flood control. So I would say the city of Minot is a fantastic regional partner. So.
Yeah, I believe so.
Well, and also, I mean, just to jump in too, that from addressing and talking with legislators, it's always been kind of the style of this process to get. I mean, you see the investment that the state put into this is massive, and especially the commitment that they gave us and the legislative intent moving forward over the next 4 or 5 biennia is, because if you look at it, Burlington is on that. You look at it, Velva's on that. You look at it, there's even a project up in Mohall. It's basin wide, and that's where you garner legislative support to invest the money that the state has invested in protecting the residents from the Canadian border to the Canadian border in this project.
Very, very well spoken, Mr. Mayor. I think that's what has garnered a lot of the support that we have down at the legislature. When we've been down there together. When we show up, people are supportive of our project and what we've got going on. So, I think it's that we've come together as a very large team of partners in this region.
Yeah, and we work really hard at really keeping Minot out of that. It's a basin wide. It's a Suras Basin flood control project. So,
very correct.
Yeah. Harold?
I was just going to add a little bit to that, in that it's designed as a system. And so as we improve and provide flood protection within the city limits, that changes the flow of the water downstream. So last thing we want to do is we protect all the citizens of Minot, and we flood out Velva and just say, well, we did our flood control project. Velva, you figure yours out on your own. I think and I wasn't here when this was negotiated or put together, but I think that is some of the rhyme and the reason that as we protect our citizens, we're changing the flow of that water, and we have responsibility to some of our our downstream partners and citizens. And so I don't know if that rises to the level of that the city of Minot should pay 100% of that. I do think some of it comes back to Alderman Blessum's point, because it seemed to play a factor in the NAS project as well. There, in North Dakota, there seems to be an affinity for arguing that because our citizens come spend money in your community, that those sales tax dollars should be used to do projects in our communities. I don't necessarily agree with that philosophy, but that seems to be the mantra in North Dakota, and it seems to carry more weight, at least than I think it should. But I think that played a factor here as well. But it is about us being a regional partner. The city of Minot's flood control is just a portion of an entire system, and it doesn't do any good to do 75% of the system and damage the other 25%. And somewhere along the way, in order to get that political support and that financing, both at the federal and the state level, this is what the city of Minot agreed to when all this was being talked about.
Mayor Ross, the city manager brings up a good point. Like you said, it's built as a system. And there are so many competing interests, on the system and varying effects of different flows in the river. So we're building flood control to the flood of record so that basically we can, get the water pushed through as fast as possible. That's kind of in concert with the downstream, some of the farmers in the hay land down around the Towner area. The Souris River down there flows out of its banks at less than 500 CFS. So we're trying to build this project that meets everybody's needs and accomplishing all the things that we wanted to accomplish. So it's complex, definitely.
Rob?
Mr. Mayor, thank you. And I appreciate what you're saying, Jason. I appreciate what you're saying, Tom and Harold. But I guess my question is, and I understand we agreed to this, but here we are, however many years later, we as a city are getting just inundated with high costs on all of this flood control stuff. And we're going to spend $9.3 million on something we agreed to do that's downstream from us. I realize we can't tell Velva, hey, we did ours, you're on your own. I get that. But the point that I'm trying to get at is we are putting this on the citizens of Minot. Now, I understand Alderman Blessum's comment as well, but if we give them a full penny, in order for them to pay $3.7 million, they'd have to spend $370 million in the city of Minot. People coming in from Velva, and I don't see that they're spending that type of money. So I guess my question is, again, I understand we got to worry about everybody, but our job is to worry about the people in the city of Minot most, right? That's what we were elected to do. That's what we're sitting here doing. And to put $3.7 million on them to fix a bridge in Velva, to me, just seems absurd without asking for any help from Velva or McHenry County. I realize the state said, hey, we'll give you money, but we're still paying the lion's share of it for everybody else. And that to me just doesn't seem right.
Anything further for Jason? Thanks, Jason. Any further discussion? Any further? Seeing none, please record your vote.
Motion passed 5-2 with dissents from Fuller and Samuelson.
Moving on to item number 7 on the agenda, that's action item 7.1, approval of the 2025 service agreements. What are the wishes of the council?
Move approval.
We have a motion by Lisa to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mark. Discussion. Any discussion? Seeing none, please record your vote.
Motion passed unanimously.
Moving on to item 7.2, process improvement and innovation training. What are the wishes of the council?
Move approval.
We have a motion by Paul to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mark. Discussion. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mike.
If I may, if we can ask the Assistant City Manager, Mr. Joyce, to come up and talk about this and what we're trying to accomplish here.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. Mayor Ross, members of council. So actually, shortly after I arrived, Mr. Stewart and I had this conversation and looking at how we can build a team that really thinks in terms of lean processes, Six Sigma, continuous process improvement. We reached out to a group that Mr. Stewart met at the International City Managers Association last year. That was the city of Tacoma. I did a little bit of research with what they have going on there. They're a much different city than we are. Tacoma, Washington, they have over 4,000 employees, so they had a huge in-house process improvement team. My recommendation to get us towards doing the best we can and being the most effective and efficient with what we have with our current team is to put as many toolkits in their toolbox to get us there, and working with Raftelis, who we've worked with in our strategic planning, hosted the retreat recently, and talking with them, built a program that I think that can get us here. This is 2.5 days of training for 20 members of our staff, and then also a half day of training for executive champions, our department heads, really to see, what does this mean after these folks are trained up in all these tools. But I think eventually it's all about a culture of excellence. So this ties in very nicely with our vision, ties in with our aspirations. Just a culture of excellence some famous person once said, culture eats strategy for lunch. So somebody might remember that. But the point being, it's that culture of excellence. So building that, getting our team, schooled in this by a third party, in my experience, has been very helpful when you have third party instructors. And then eventually, I'm hopeful that this can actually be built into our workforce development program that HR is working on, where it's more of a train the trainer concept as well. So if we get 20 folks that are really tuned into this, and as we build on it and we do various process improvement events, potentially we have a group of that 20 that becomes a train the trainer concept, and we can get, as we work through it, as many people possible as trained and thinking along the process of continuous process improvement.
Mr. Mayor and Council, if I can add to that, ultimately, when I sat in on this and watched the present, and I actually sat in 2 presentations from the staff from the Tacoma, Washington. The issue here, what resonated with me is, it started with a budget analyst in their finance department. We don't have budget analysts, but what it was an attempt at, as they're going through the budget process, all the departments are requesting new positions or softwares or tools to solve a problem, but there was never any process to go through and assess, one, what is the problem, what are the alternatives, what are the pros and cons to that, and then what is the right solution to fix that problem. And what they were finding is that by going through this process that this budget analyst created was probably 75% of the time they were able to identify just changes in process with their current resources, as opposed to adding new staff or spending a lot of money on a new software package or those kinds of things. Sometimes that came out as the recommendation, but it was going through that process of forcing them to be more lean and to get more return on an investment on their current resources and assets. And as Mr. Joyce mentioned, we've been talking about this, and we felt that this was a way. We're not asking for new staff. We're asking to train and bring these in so we can develop this process in-house, that we can train our current staff to help us do this. So as we're going through the budget processes, when those recommendations come to my office and ultimately to the city council, that there's confidence that we've gone through this process. We've identified the process or the problem. What are the alternative solutions? What can we change without spending more money? And then if the recommendation is to add more resources, why is that the best alternative? And that's what we're trying to accomplish through this process.
Any questions? Lisa?
Thank you. Just a comment. I mean, I believe that our staff are our greatest asset, and you put investments into your assets. It just makes sense that making this training available will make our staff better. They'll be better problem solvers. There'll be more of a cohesiveness, part of a sense of being a team. So I think it's a good investment.
Mike?
So with this, I'm of 2 minds. I think I've said from up here before, this is work I've done. I did this as a consultant at 3M Company. I spent 2 years of my career at the very beginning doing exactly this kind of work. And there's no question that it can be a great way to go about things. If you've got a bought-in team that's really getting after it and they go and get things done, you can have incredible movement. But the one thing I would say along with that, and I think you're on the right track, Harold, I would like to think that it could even go a little further than that we may identify things that are not serving the people of our city the way that we expect them to. And it's more than just saying, oh, shoot, we avoid a little bit of new cost going forward, which is important. We got to slow the growth of what we're doing and change the trajectory a little bit. But that we actually find things where we go, maybe we don't need to do that anymore. Or maybe we need to do this different, and that means that we can actually get by with less. Whether that's a position that's now open that doesn't get filled, or that's one that over time we attrit down to a different number than it is today. And so to me, that's what's important about this, and why in the end I will support it. What I really get concerned about is that we go down that path, we go ahead and do the training, we spend the money, and we come out the back end and we continue to see, well, shoot, we could do this much better. All that I need is these extra 2 people. Because that kind of seems to be the progression that's been there. So I'm hopeful that this is an inflection point and it starts a new path and a new way of looking at things. The other thing that I'll comment on, I do commend city staff for, this is coming out of current budgets. It's being pulled from different little training budgets. But even with that in mind, we still do want to be clear. It's not likely those are going to be spent. And so, we are spending money that we had budgeted, but if we didn't do this, it likely just would have gone unspent and it would have ended up in our pile of cash that we like to keep. So, it is not just a simple, hey, should we do this? We're already going to anyway. This is a new spend in my book. And I'm hopeful that we'll go in a direction that really is meaningful. And so I'm going to support it. I'm a little bit concerned, but I'll keep a close eye and hopefully we get good things out of it.
Rob?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess one of the things I just heard while we were sitting here talking is, and I believe it was Harold, said we got to spend $26,000 so our employees can figure out how not to spend more money in the future. I've been to a number of these things in my banking career, and while I get them, they're good rah-rah and team building events. Do we not have enough good leaders in our city and our department heads already that we can figure out where not to spend that extra money going forward? I know they teach things and they do certain things, but to me, again, I'm probably going to vote yes on it, but like Mike, I'm concerned. Again, we're sending people off to learn not how to spend money and look for efficiencies. I would hope we would have that within our city already.
Just a question to Tom. When you're looking at a program like this, what kind of metrics, what's the signal for success? I know it's not going to come immediate, or maybe it could come immediate, but what, as a leader in the city, what are you looking for that says this is going to be, or this was a successful investment?
Mayor Ross, I think, both really Alderman Blessum, Alderman Fuller, Alderman Olson, it all wraps into that, right? First you're investing in your people, but as you go further, what in fact are the no value added processes and activities and services that that we may be providing? And sometimes people get caught up in a rut that they're doing the same thing, and it may not be providing the same value today that it provided 10 years ago. Right, and I think part of this training, and I understand what Alderman Fuller is saying too. I've been part of those trainings too. But part of this training is by bringing in a group of 20 folks that will be vetted by the team that they're the right person. And this isn't just department heads. This is individual contributors, their foremen, their team leads. Getting that right team that they're all bought into this in the first place. But back, Mayor Ross, back to the metrics. It's that's what we'll have to define as we go forward. But to me, it's just that we're not only taking something and making it better, which in fact could be more resource intensive. We might need more resources, but it's actually finding those processes where they're either reduced, they're eliminated, or there's some way of cost savings in those particular processes.
Thank you. Any other questions of Tom?
I just have one question. Thank you, Tom. The training and stuff, the 2.5 days, is that in Minot, or are we sending our people out to do that?
Alderman Samuelson, Mayor Ross, no, we're bringing them here. So we'll have them here. We'll find a training area here. So saving costs by bringing the instructors here versus sending 20 out somewhere else.
Go ahead, Harold.
Mr. Mayor.
But if there's no further questions of Tom, you can go back to sit. But
Mr. Mayor, if I may add a little bit here, we often hear that government needs to run more like a business. So this is an attempt by staff to bring a proven process that has benefited private business, lean processes, that in my experience, government hasn't adopted or executed within their organizations. So in my opinion, this is Minot being a little bit more cutting edge to try and be a little bit more like business and taking proven concepts that they've done and trying to figure out how do we convert that over into our world of local government. ultimately, that's what we're asking for. I've been through a few budget processes in my career, and there's patterns that I notice that sometimes, maybe we don't push ourselves as hard as we should. We get caught up in the status quo, and we don't push ourselves as hard as we can. So this process is an attempt to bring a new way of thinking into our organization and into our culture, to push us to think outside the box, and to do it in a format that's a little bit more quick and a more efficient. Do we have people that are probably smart enough to sit here and talk through this and figure it out? Yeah, probably. But I would tell you that my experience with organizational change, that'll probably take you anywhere from 3 to 5 years to do that effectively, versus going out and investing in this training in a system that some local governments have already looked at doing and have already begun that process, and will cut that time frame down to 1 to 2 years as opposed to 3 to 5. Ultimately, that's what we're investing in. We're investing in the efficiency to bring those concepts to us in a proven format, and then we can tweak it to Minot and our organization's needs and get those results more quickly. That's the attempt of what we're trying to do here. We're trying to find ways to be more efficient, more effective, and to be consistent with that through the organization, through all of our departments. And we can get bogged down in disputes within the departments of how something will or will not work for their department, and it bogs down. So this is a way to expedite that process, bring in a system that has proven to work in some more high-performing organizations across the country, particularly in local government, and to give us a head start on that.
Rob?
Mr. Mayor, thank you. Harold, I appreciate. So just real quick then, will we see a reduction in the city budget next year when they come back, and hopefully we're getting leaner and more efficient?
The discretion of the council on how to use that will be yours. What we're trying to do is we're trying to do more with less, right? We continue to see increase in costs in utilities and wages and all those other kinds of things. The goal here is to try and figure out how we can provide more and better quality services with the resources that we already have without having to ask for more money. Now, whether the council wants to see that there's savings there and you want to cut those costs, that'll be a decision of the council through those budget processes.
Mr. Mayor.
Mike?
So, and maybe a different way to get at the same idea, Harold, as we go through the process next spring, and I'd like to think, when is the timing for actually doing the training? Is it still yet this fall or winter?
Not yet identified.
Okay, but I guess I would say if we're able to move forward with it, let's do it as soon as we can, right? Because that's all that much more time and thinking. And I guess where I was headed then is I would love to see, as we go through the budget process next year and the budget hearings, that you and your team are able to bring to us places where you say, hey, we're implementing, that process that you guys approved for us. Here's a place where we implemented it, and here's a place where we were able to adjust or save or whatever that is. I would love to hear that because, again, I'm a believer in this process because I've seen it work. I've done it myself, but I do want to see that we see the fruits of that coming out, and I think that's a great place for us to see that is during that process.
Mr. Mayor, Alderman Blessum and Alderman Fuller, I would agree that that's important. We're presenting it to you tonight, but we want to demonstrate the success not only to you as a council, but to the public, that we're doing our due diligence. Hopefully, as we go through the budget process, maybe we have some wins of, hey, we had an ask for this, but as we've gone through this process, we don't need to ask you for any additional funding because here's how we found efficiencies. One of the examples out of Tacoma, Washington had to do with their library, who was skeptical of even participating in the process because they thought they'd already done all their due diligence. There was no alternatives to save money or do it differently. They had a backup of books. They had carts and carts of books. They had a room full of carts of books waiting to be put back on the shelves. And they argued that they just didn't have the staff capacity to do that anymore. So they were asking for 2 or 3 new positions just to put books back on the shelf in the library on a more timely fashion. Well, they went through that process. Not only did they not add the additional 2 or 3 staff, but they reduced a whole room full of carts with books on them down to maybe 2 or 3 carts with books on them at a max, using their current resources to do that. So the public benefited because those books were put back into circulation in a much quicker format, and the taxpayers didn't have to pay any additional money to do that, right? And so that's what we're trying to accomplish here. So instead of staff just coming in and say, we're really busy, we need more help, so we're asking for another position. We're going to go through, okay, so what's keeping you busy? And is that our most effective use of our time? Do we have better ways of doing that? And can we find better efficiency? So before we come and ask the public and the council for more money, taxpayer dollars to add positions or spend money on $1 million software package, we've gone through this process, we've vetted that, and we found other efficiencies. And I agree that we need to share those successes with you and with the public as we do that, to show that we're getting the most juice out of that squeeze as we can before we come and ask for another orange.
So just a question, Mike, because you have experience in this. How much of a program like this, this training, how much of it would you say is almost a license to empower our staff to find those cost savings? What, in your experience, what have you found?
Well, so I'll tell you the process that we went through to get there. Number one, when I joined 3M, I joined in a group called Optimized Operations. And that is what we did. It was based off the big four accounting firms and the way that they did consulting. And what I will tell you is it wasn't us going out and empowering the divisions. We went into the divisions and said, tell us about this process, let's map it out, let's figure out what's going on, revamp where we can, recommendations to senior leadership. So I think what Harold and Tom are getting at with empowering those, whether it's department heads or other, kind of key players, I think that's a different approach that I think can be very fruitful for those that are buying in. And I think that's the key to the whole thing. It's really, what you may end up with is that you have, let's say, 20 people that you train, and 12 of them are the heavy hitters on this, and they're fully bought in and they're killing it. And this sort of goes back to me to the stuff that I've been pushing on, getting to a merit-based wage increase, all those types of things. Those people that are buying into this and making it happen, they deserve that. They deserve those additional, that additional wage that's coming along with that. So in my experience, it'll be interesting to see how well that sort of transfer of knowledge works, because we did it as a, write a document and pass off results. So I'm hopeful. I think this is a consultant that we've had experience with, and I think hopefully city staff is comfortable with. So I'm expecting to be successful. I think the big question is, are we able to tell the story about how it's successful, and does it truly change the trajectory? And that's what I'm looking for.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? We have a motion and a second on the floor. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, please record your vote.
Motion passed unanimously.
Moving on to item 7.3, approve the memorandum of understanding between the City of Minot and the Central Dakota Metropolitan Planning Organization. What are the wishes of the council?
Mr. Mayor, I'd move approval.
We have a motion by Mark. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Lisa. Discussion. Any discussion? Final call. Seeing none, we have a motion and a second. Please record your vote.
Motion passed unanimously.
Moving on to item 7.4, approve the office lease agreement with the Central Dakota Metropolitan Planning Organization. What are the wishes of the council?
Move approval.
We have a motion by Lisa. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mark. Discussion.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Just
Mike.
real briefly, Harold or Tom or whoever can answer this one. With this one, most of what we're seeing the city take on is reimbursed. I do get concerned. We've got overhead with the building. We've got overhead with HR, because these are fully city. The main employee is a full city employee, right? So we've got a bunch of that. Are there provisions in here, just like I asked with the biota plant? Are there provisions to reimburse those overhead expenses as well as part of the calculations?
Mr. Mayor, Alderman Blessum, ultimately, this is what this lease is supposed to do. In essence, we're providing them a space at cost, and then they use their MPO or federal funds to pay those. And then we, as the owner of the space, can determine what those costs are. So if our overhead goes up, we have the ability to come and negotiate through that lease a higher lease rate with regards to that. But that's the intent here. And ultimately, what we're trying to do is we're trying to provide space that, one, is appropriate for the organization and the work that they're doing, that's why they're located here at City Hall versus Public Works or some other building. But two is we want to minimize their costs on these administrative sides so that more of their funding is available for planning and projects that have an impact on the community of Minot. So rather than spend a lot of money renting a facility in an office or a building, we're trying to keep those costs as low as we can, which we can do by providing space in a building that we already own and have control of, and leaving that money available for the planning and the projects that can have impacts on the transportation side, on the service and the quality within our community.
And if I can continue, Mr. Mayor, and so just a short statement about that again, though, for me, you know, we've got a bunch of these things going on now, whether it's biota plant, the CDBG funds, we've got all these different federal funds that flow through. And yes, they're reimbursed. Yes, those all show up. But at some point, as those things grow, these are the things that put strains on space. They put strains on when does the next HR specialist need to get hired? Because we've got another set of employees that we're servicing for payroll and other pieces of it. And so just something we always got to keep in mind, the sort of free federal money is interesting and all those things that go with that, but there's strings and they tie us up in knots.
Mr. Mayor, if I can respond a little bit on that, and just remember that the Metropolitan Planning Organization is at the very beginning. We've been working for almost 2 years now, standing this up and creating this and putting it together. And I think we're at a good spot and we've done a good job with that. But the goal hopefully is that it continues to grow and eventually the MPO stands on its own. And the city is more participants at the policy board and the technical advisory committee levels, and hopefully they grow to a point that we don't have enough space for them at City Hall and they're gonna have to move somewhere else, right? As they add staff and those kinds of things. But the important thing is to get them off to the right start, and we feel this is the best way to help do that.
Any further discussion? Anything further? Seeing none, we have a motion and a second. Please record your vote.
Motion passed unanimously.
Moving on to item 7.5, the ND DOT Federal Aid Project Solicitations. What are the wishes of the council?
Mr. Mayor, I'd move approval on the recommendation.
We have a motion by Mark. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Rob. Discussion at this time, I guess we're calling up City Engineer, Mr. Meyer. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. I just wanted to give a real brief presentation on what these solicitations are. The DOT will send out these solicitations every year to the city. Since we have some new council members, I wanted to walk through what some of those are and then just education for the public on what some of these programs are that we apply for every year. So there's mainly 4 or 5 programs that get solicited every year. The planning and rail program will address things like rough crossings or safety improvements with rail crossings in our community. The urban grant program focuses on the downtown core of our city, so federal aid roadways within our urban core. The urban and urban regional program is really any federal aid route within the city. The urban regional roadways are Burdick Expressway, Broadway, and Valley Street. They have a little bit different cost match on those. Our transportation alternatives projects are basically non-motorized type of projects. And then our highway safety improvement program deals with any kind of project that helps to improve public safety on our roadways. So jumping into some of the projects that we recommend that we apply for, on the planning and rail side, priority number 1, and I broke this out into 2 priorities. Priority 1 is the 8th Avenue Southeast crossing at the Canadian Pacific Kansas City crossing. It's pretty rough, as we all know, as we drive over that. Now that we got 3rd Street taken care of, this is our number 1 most requested crossing to be addressed. We get a lot of complaints on this, and right now the program that the DOT has in place has a 0% or $0 city cost match. It's 100% federally funded, or the 10% cost match is picked up by the participating railroads. So We can take advantage of that program while it still has the zero local match. When we submit these projects, they're submitted to the state all over from different communities or counties. They're ranked, and basically the projects are programmed until the funding is out, and then those projects are then forwarded to next year's program. So the earliest that this could be funded is 2026, but it could be in years later. So we won't really know probably for a few months until when our project might be selected. Priority number 2 would be the Amtrak crossing. We would propose to signalize this crossing. It's the only unsignalized crossing in Minot. All the other ones have crossing gates on them. Now this crossing is federally eligible since council made the decision here a couple months ago not to move forward with a quiet zone. So the direction given to us was to go out and look for any kind of federal funding opportunities that could apply to this. This program would now apply to the crossing. There's a potential for a $0 city cost share. However, depending on what agreement we may have with CPKC, they may have a crossing maintenance agreement for the signalization that we'd have to work through. At this point, just to be conservative, I assumed a 10% cost match, which was based on that $750,000 for the previous signal project. So depending on where this project lands, depending on what the agreement may or may not be with CPKC, we've earmarked $75,000 in 26 for this project. The urban grant program, like I had mentioned, is for federally eligible roadways within the urban core of the city. This is what our urban core looks like. It's the green and purple roadways within this yellow box. So that's the definition of our urban core. We successfully applied and received a grant to reconstruct 3rd Street and Central Avenue in 2027 from the 3rd Street Viaduct south to Front Street, which is just south of the railroad tracks. The solicitation year was for 2028. We decided not to request a grant that year just in case timelines or funding would slip with the 27 project. We didn't want two contractors working kind of over the top of each other. So our recommendation would be to take a year off in the program and then come back in 29 and request funding for the second phase of the 3rd Street project if council wants to move forward with that. Our urban our urban and urban regional program, that's, like I mentioned, all federal aid roadways within the city. The jurisdiction of the road depends on what the cost share is. So most of our federal aid projects are 80% federal, 20% local match by the city. If it's on Broadway, Burdick, or Valley Street, since those are U.S. federal highways, our cost share generally drops down to 10% on those roadways. The solicitation year that the DOT has requested is for 2029, but we'll just be finishing up our phase 2 of the 16th Street reconstruction. So we won't have enough federal funds built up yet to do any kind of meaningful projects. So we really don't have anything to submit for 29. However, 3rd Street Bridge, like I had mentioned, does have some issues, and we need to start planning for some sort of replacement project in the future. So what I'm suggesting is requesting $1.5 million in federal funds for 2026 to start preliminary engineering so we understand what our cost impacts would be, our right-of-way footprint, any kind of permitting and railroad coordination. We need to get a good handle on that so that when we apply for either future federal grants or we're working through agreements, we have a better understanding of what our constraints and impacts may be. So 80-20 cost share on this, our local match would be $300,000 for 2026. Transportation Alternatives Program, typically used for non-motorized transportation projects such as sidewalks, bike paths, or corridor beautification projects. We've been very successful in the 15 years that I've been here applying for safe routes to schools. I think we've gotten a project almost every year that we've applied. So they're generally looked upon very favorably just because of their high safety impact. The 27 solicitation year, we're recommending we continue to install sidewalks around Edison Elementary. The project here would be shown in red. So it has a nice connection to the shared use path on 16th Street. And then we'd install sidewalks along 18th and then into the existing sidewalk network to try to make all those connections work. We're estimating at this point a 1.4 million total project cost. Our cost share would be about $516,000. And then finally, our Highway Safety Improvement Program, we call this HSIP for short. The goal of this program is to seek reduction in serious injury or fatalities by installing infrastructure safety-related improvements. For 29, staff is proposing street lighting around elementary schools with poor lighting. Most of the elementary schools in the core of the city, they don't have great street lighting. We'll have, a pole at the corner and maybe one or two in the middle, mid-block if it's a long block. So we have some pretty significant gaps in street lighting around these schools. Some statistics here, by installing street lighting, you can reduce crashes by up to 42% of nighttime injury pedestrian crashes at intersections, which is pretty significant. And then also, you can reduce crashes by 33 to 38% nighttime crashes at urban intersections. So basically, lighting up the roadway, lighting up the intersection, increases visibility, reduces crashes. We provided a couple options for council to consider, depending on where you want to go. Option one, which is our recommended option, is to address all the low lighting schools. This would be Washington, Edison, Perkett, Bel Air, Longfellow, Sunnyside, Roosevelt, and Lewis and Clark. That at a total project cost of about $1.45 million. We have a 10% cost share on HSIP projects, so we'd have about $145,000 cost share. Option two, this would address schools that have pickup and drop-off zones only on the public roadways. Some of the schools I mentioned above have drop-off zones within the school. Generally, those are more lit parking lots. So if you wanted to do a reduced project scope, we could address the ones that just have drop-offs on city streets, and that would include Bel Air, Sunnyside, and Roosevelt, and that has about a $434,000 total project cost, $43,000 and change for our city cost. So our recommendation to you for planning and rail, it would be both priorities 1 and 2 to start getting those in the program. Try to take advantage of that zero city cost share if we can. Both of those would be in 2026 or later. For the urban and urban regional would be to start the 3rd Street Bridge preliminary engineering in 26. Transportation alternatives would be to continue our safe routes to schools around the Edison Elementary School. And then for highway safety improvement would be, our recommendation is option 1 to address all the low lighting schools. With all of these federal aid projects, it's completely up to city council on which projects they may or may not want to move forward with. Based on your direction, what we would do is we would take this list of projects, we would then forward that to the MPO and say this is our recommended projects. The policy board at the MPO would then approve that list of projects. We would complete the applications, send that on to the NDDOT by December 31st, and they would start trying to program those into the federal aid process. With that, I would be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Mike?
Lance, one thing you just mentioned there, I guess I didn't realize. So we now have an approval step at the MPO for these types of projects?
Mr. Mayor and Alderman Blessum, technically, no, for this year, because we don't have what's called a transportation plan, right? Sure. But once that plan is adopted by all the member agencies, then we will have to officially submit this to the MPO. So it is another step in the process. So this is kind of like, think of it like our practice year, if you will.
Okay. So if I can continue, and Harold, if you want to jump in too, I guess, the way that I was thinking of the MPO was that we're putting together a plan that's comprehensive and it, kind of leads and hopefully streamlines everything. But is it better to think of this as you know, let's make sure it matches up with what the MPO is thinking than it is an approval. Because is there a veto power there where they can tell us you can't do these kind of projects?
Mr. Mayor, Alderman Blessum, I think the best way to look at an MPO, and truly what an MPO is, it's trying to get our member agencies to coordinate transportation projects, right? So the only conflict that may come is, let's say, for instance, that we wanted to do an urban reconstruction on one of the city Minot streets in 2030. And let's say the county engineer wanted to do a county overlay on one of the county roads within the urban boundary in 2030. The funding, the federal funding that comes now into the MPO is now shared by our member agencies, Surrey, Ward County, and Minot within that urban boundary. So if we have competing projects within that year, it's up to us as engineers to sit down together and try to map out which priorities should move forward. Maybe our project can wait a year, and maybe the county engineer's project is more of a dire need and his needs to advance. And so the whole point of this is to sit down at the technical advisory committee level, which is where I'm at, and to have those conversations with all the engineers and the planners in the room, try to plan that out, and then provide a recommendation up to the MPO policy board and then back to our councils and commissions. So the whole goal of the MPO is to try to coordinate all these transportation projects together.
And Mr. Mayor, if I may add to that, the thing to bear in mind is that the MPO brings more local control and influence into that process. So before that, we were going through the same process, but it was with the DOT. But instead of competing with Ward County and Surrey and Burlington, we were competing with all communities across the state that didn't have an MPO. So just like we're prioritizing that now through the MPO at the local level, the DOT was prioritizing all of those projects of Minot, Dickinson, Jamestown, Wapaton. We're competing against all of those in that same pool. Versus now with the MPO, we have more local control on that. Instead of competing against the whole state, now we're bringing that down to the regional level, and we have the ability to have more input into that prioritization process. And the city of Minot has 3 delegates on the policy board that help set those priorities for the MPO, that being Alderwoman Olson, Alderman Janser, and myself, and Alderman Pittner serving as an alternate. And so we're 3 of the 7 votes on the policy board. And most of the qualifying area within the MPO is like 90% inside the city limits of Minot. So yes, there's an extra step to that, but it gives us more control and influence over that process going forward than we had without the MPO prior to that, if that makes sense.
Mr. Mayor, if I can continue.
Mike.
So is it also safe to say then that many of those conversations would be happening before we even see this? So as we do this in subsequent years, those conversations would already have taken place, and there's more of a comprehensive plan going on across those entities anyway? Is that a better way to think of that maybe?
That is correct, with heavy Minot influence into what those priorities are, yes.
Okay.
Any other questions of Lance? Thank you, Lance. Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I do have a question. Previously, staff recommended and council approved some changes at the intersection next to Jim Hill. And one of the conversations there was with the removal of the lights, was increasing pedestrian safety through adding more lighting around that. So is that intersection eligible in here? Was that discussed by staff? Or is that not to a level of priority or ready yet to be included in this year's ask of improving lighting around the schools, particularly with that intersection for pedestrian safety?
Mr. City Manager, what our plan is, yes, it would be eligible for this program. However, we are proposing the lighting around Jim Hill and the intersection at 6th and 11th to be included in a reconstruction project at 11th Avenue. So as part of the capital improvement planning process, we would bring that project to council for consideration. If council wanted to change or not include that project, we could bring a lighting project back at a future date as a different project. So that's a discussion yet to be had.
Lance, you did, and thanks for reminding me, Harold, about that. Lance, you gave us 2 options in that. Is it more attractive, or does it serve us better to do like a system-wide fix as an option number 1 versus doing a couple now and a couple maybe next time? Couple schools?
Mr. Mayor, are you referring to the schools?
Yes, that's it, yeah.
Yeah, and that's our recommendation is to do all the schools in one shot. You're going to get a little better scale of economy for one, and I think that way then all the schools are treated the same would be how we look at it.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Actually, to follow up on that program too, Lance, so is the Highway Safety Improvement Program, is there something that ties it to schools? Or is that just one thing we're doing now that is eligible?
Mr. Mayor and Alderman Blessum, it's just one thing that we're doing now. A couple years ago, we worked with the DOT and we did intersection improvements at the 2 and 52 bypass and Evergreen Avenue. Those 3/4 turn lanes, that was a project. We've done in 26, we have a signalization project. We're going to do some signal upgrades around Minot. 28, we've requested DOT funding for speed reduction signs on some of our arterial roads where we have a lot of speeding. So there's multiple types of projects that are eligible. This is just one that makes sense. We've had complaints to our office about lighting issues and issues around schools. The community survey results say that citizens would like more street lighting. Of course, they don't want to be special assessed for it. So this is a way to try to address some of those concerns without doing the specials, is to try to apply for as much grant funding as we possibly can.
A couple of follow-ups then. So one with that, would the Leach Park area lighting project been eligible for this program?
Mr. Mayor and Alderman Blessum, potentially. However, I think the safety focus with it being around schools like this is going to score enough points that it's going to be funded, because all of these projects are scored by a committee, right? So there's projects coming in throughout the state. And so if we can tie this back to safety and pedestrians and specific concerns, we're going to have a better chance of getting a project funded. If it's just a project to replace like an existing city street lighting system, while it is eligible, I don't think it would be funded, just because of the sheer volume of requests that the state gets.
Okay. And so then with that, we're focusing on the schools here, and I think we'd all agree we want schools to be safe. But I guess in my mind, I'm not thinking of this as lighting up school drop-off and pickup, while I'm sure there are a few, couple months out of the year where that actually is the case. I guess my question is this the highest priority for us, even with street lighting? Or are there other safety issues that come into that? I mean, this is a convenient one because it's kind of a package. You can get your arms around it, right? Which I kind of like. I mean, that makes sense. But it feels like it's not solving exactly what we might be thinking it is, because it's not exactly about just drop off and pick up. It's those corridors where hopefully there are a lot of kids moving around, or we want that safety factor there. I think that makes sense. But if we were doing different priorities, and again, that's why I go back to Leach Park, where we've got a set of residents there who, through really no fault of their own, had their lighting system go out because of the flood and everything else that went with it. And they were special assessed. And so now I understand if it's going to get denied, it doesn't do us any good, right? We can put it in, but it's just not going to work. So anyway, I'm not sure there was a question there, just kind of thinking out loud more than anything else, because that one, we are tying it to schools, which I think I understand why that would be scored high, but I'm not sure that that's exactly what we're solving with those.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor and Alderman Blessum, great points, but you also have to remember too with this program is we're scheduling this, 4 or 5 years out in advance. So if a system like Leach Park, fails, for us to have that system off for 4 or 5 years until the federal funding may or may not come would be a pretty big risk to us. So we have to take that in consideration too.
Any other questions? Lisa?
Yeah, thank you. So just to kind of piggyback off that a little bit, we certainly saw the 3rd Street Bridge be an issue for several months as it was being looked at and reviewed for safety and things. And now we're going to potentially push out an engineering, look at it again in 2026. So do you feel comfortable with that? Because it looks like the timeline is much longer. I assume maybe we'd be looking at even portions of it sooner than that, or is that going to be kind of 2 different things? We're going to fix what needs to be fixed and then look at the project as a whole in 2026 and beyond.
Mr. Mayor and Alderwoman Olson, it's a step process. So, step number one is addressing the pier that's having some issues. So here in a couple of weeks, we'll interview consultants for that project. And our plan is in '25 is to put a project together and bid that out and address that pier. There may be a couple other issues that we may or may not address here in the near future, just kind of depending on timelines. But for the most part, with doing that pier repair, I think that's probably one of the most pressing issues with the bridge. But we're kind of at that point where it's a cost benefit question. Like, how much money do you want to put into an 88-year-old structure, knowing that within 5 years or so, 3 years, 8 years, that is probably going to have to be removed and replaced. And so that's the balancing act that we're going to have over the next few years. The need for this project is we don't have a good handle on project cost. A bridge of this size, of this length, with the bridge prices that we're seeing right now, is probably going to be anywhere from $30 to $40 million for a full replacement. So it's important for us to try to get our hands around bridge type. Right-of-way constraints are going to be a big question with the railroad. And then based on what they say, that's going to affect our design and potentially any right-of-way impacts that we're going to have. And so we really need to understand all of that and package that, because once we have more of that information, that makes us more successful when we go after things like RAISE grants or some of the other federal bridge funding that's out there. So that's our goal.
Okay, and I like that clarification, because I think there probably are still some people who have some concerns about the safety. So that'll get addressed soon. Bigger picture, a little bit further down the road.
Right,
Thank you.
and just to reiterate, we had the bridge inspected. We had it load rated. It's safe. Otherwise, we wouldn't have reopened it. And in 2025, it'll be re-inspected by DOT because it's on a 2-year cycle.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any further questions of Lance? Thank you, Lance.
You're welcome.
We have a motion and a second on the floor. Any further discussion? Mike?
So, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to, for discussion here, I want to bring an amendment to this motion. I'd like to see us remove the transportation alternatives section, which is the safe routes to school. So that's the motion.
We have an amendment. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Is that Rob? Have an amendment and a second discussion.
So, Mr. Mayor, the main reason I'm looking at this, it's another safety project. It's another one that will provide some level of safety along that corridor. I've lived in that corridor near Edison for the last 20 years, 20 plus years. And, that entire area was built without sidewalks. We go for a walk, it's nice to be able to be on a sidewalk, and I don't think anybody disputes that whatsoever. My thought here, though, is we've got a couple constraints. We've always got a money constraint. We talk about it on almost every item in front of us. That's always there. Here we've got $516,000. That's our cost share on it. But more importantly, and I think this is the real key to this one, and this was from our budget discussions, this is Lance's staff doing this work. They're designing every single aspect of this, every corner, every ramp, every ADA compliant structure that's put in place. And we're providing not only a money constraint on everything else that we do for what I would consider a nice to have, but we're also putting a constraint on our staff. And when I asked Lance what our constraint was to doing even more roadway work, which is what I think all of us are hearing from residents and we'd all like to see, one of the constraints is in Lance's staff in being able to design that. And so, I think it's important. The other factor that I want to throw out here is that while these are nice to haves, as I mentioned, they're also an unfunded mandate on the property owners. They are forced a sidewalk where they've never had one since many of them, the day they built their house there. They're forced now to take care of that. They're forced in the future when it needs to be replaced to replace it. They've got to have it shoveled. They've got to have it cleaned, everything else that goes along with that. So for my colleagues, I would respectfully ask you to join me in removing this portion for this year. There may be a time in the future, maybe the program's still there and we come back to it, but I think for now it's a nice to have that we could live without.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, we have an amendment and a second. Please record your vote.
The motion fails with a 3-4 vote. Dissents from Janser, Olson, Pittner, and Ross.
Moving back to the original motion, any further discussion? Anything further? Seeing none, please record your vote.
Motion passed unanimously.
Moving on to action item 7.6, approve budget amendment for the Employment Investigation Services. What are the wishes of the council?
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion by Rob, second by Mark. Discussion. Is there any discussion? Last call. Seeing none, please record your vote.
Motion passed unanimously.
Moving on to item 7.7, the Minot Park District half-cent sales tax. What are the wishes of the council?
I'll
I would
make a
move
motion.
approval on the request.
We have a motion by Lisa, second by Paul. Discussion.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Lisa.
Thank you. So we had the meeting, we had the presentation from the Park District. The reason it's coming to us is that they don't have the authority to levy the sales tax, and we do. So we need to partner with them in order for them to make that request to the voters. And while we may not all agree up here that it is the right move to make, I don't think it is right for us to deny the voters the opportunity to vote on that. I haven't determined yet how I'll vote on it, but I think that it is something that's important for the residents in Minot to have a voice on, and that's why I made the motion to approve.
Any further, Rob?
Thank you. So we had those two special meetings last week, and in my 5 months on the council, I received more calls, texts, and emails last week than I did at any point going forward. Besides the resounding or overwhelming feeling from the community that more taxes is not what they're looking for right now, I agree with Lisa. It's up to the community, and we need to get it on there. But two things I did hear continuously from constituents in the community that got a hold of me was, one, they didn't like the date for the special election if we allow that. April they thought was too early because, as mentioned, a lot of snowbirds won't be home yet in April when they were planning to do it. So if we're going to do this and allow the park board to put it on the ballot, I would say we do a special election later, like June possibly. Because we got a lot, if we all remember the school bond that happened on December 6th or 7th a couple of years ago, about 4,300 people voted and decided for 47,000 people that we needed a new school. And I heard from a lot of people that they don't want that to happen again. So if we do approve this, I would ask that we maybe move it a little bit later in the year so everybody in Arizona and Florida and everything is home. Second thing, I kept hearing is people are very concerned that they're leaving the property tax portion of it intact. Although they're giving a 5-year abatement to it, in 5 years, people feel like they're going to double dip. And I know in the meeting the other day, Ellie DeLoyers told us their plan is not to, but that doesn't help the citizens in Minot feel better about it. And so one of the things I would also recommend is if we're going to approve this and put it on there in addition to changing the date, is to sit down with the park board and maybe make it permanent that the reduction in mills from 38 to 26 isn't just a 5-year commitment, but a forever commitment, because they're going to be able to keep the sales tax in place into perpetuity. So those are the couple things I wanted to say to the council. Now, one question I do have for the park board, and I don't know who wanted to talk. When we were having our meeting the other day, I got the impression that one of the main user groups that was going to use this facility would be the Minot Soccer Association. I had a number of people from the Minot Soccer Association reach out and talk to me, and they said, hey, we don't plan to use this very often because we're in the process of building our own facility as well. I guess they had land donated to them and whatnot. So we're planning on building a $17 million facility. Who are the main user groups if it's not the Minot Soccer Association?
Mayor Ross and Alderman Fuller, you know, they were involved in all the discussions the Minot Soccer Association was. So we have told them along the way that they would be welcome to use it. When we brought it up, we told that they'd be using it for tournaments and things such as that as well. We're looking at our baseball groups, our softball groups, Prairie Grit, also just the Minot community. So as we talked about in that meeting last week again, we also want to make sure that this facility is going to be open for the general public and not just certain user groups as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Mike?
Ellie, just to Alderman Fuller's point, would the park board be amenable to a June election?
I believe so, yes. I mean, it's something I would obviously want to bring back to my full board, but I think we'd be definitely up for the discussion for sure.
Okay. Mr. Mayor, if I could, so for the city attorney, can we bring that amendment now and get that taken care of at least in our documentation? And then as long as they're amenable to that, it just moves forward from there?
Alderman Blessum and City Council, so I think that depends on if you have an exact date in mind that you want to insert into the resolution. So so it's a three-part motion essentially that was moved by Alderwoman Olson. And so it's to pass the attached ordinance on first reading, so approving the ordinance that would go into effect if it's approved by the voters, adopting the attached resolution that would set that special election date, which is currently April 29th. So we could table the motion as well if that's something that Park Board wants to take a look at and look at a June election date. The third part is to approve the attached ballot language as well.
Mr. Mayor, if I could continue. So, and I apologize, I'm sure you just answered this for us and I can't remember the answer. We're passing an ordinance, though. Do we have a second reading on this ordinance?
Yes, that would occur after the election.
Oh, that's right.
Unless there's some amendment that you want to pose to it at some later date. I mean, we have some time in between here in April, and especially if that election date would be pushed back further. But yeah, it would be approving the substance of this ordinance that's before the council today.
Okay, because I guess my thought right now, and Ellie, please, you know, I know you can't speak for the board directly, but just give your thoughts. You know, my thought is to bring the amendment right now to move it to a June 10th, which is a Tuesday, the second Tuesday in June. And you know, if my colleagues agree, I think we would be fine with moving that forward, at least those that are on board already. So if that's a possibility, I don't know what the process would need to be, if it has to go back to the park board to approve that, or if we can move that forward tonight. It's not my intent to delay it, and I don't think it was Rob's either, but this is one thing that could make that a little bit easier to ballot.
So Alderman Blessum and Council, one consideration to take in mind is setting the resolution is to schedule the election as currently contemplated. The county would be helping us to facilitate that special election, so we'd want to make sure that they would be able to assist us in that regard, confirm any fees that would be associated with that. And if they're not able to assist us in that, would the council then be contemplating the city then administering the election itself?
So the idea so far is that all the parties are in agreement, right, with April 29th, is that correct? Ellie? So the county's already on board, that we know what the cost of that would be. City, you know, we're sort of the last step in that. Is that
Yes.
correct?
Yep, that's correct.
Okay.
We'd have to do a poll of the other parties to make sure that that June 10th date would be amenable.
Okay. So I'm just looking back at dates. So our first December meeting is the 2nd, is that right?
Yes.
Again, it's not my intent to delay that. I was hoping that we could do an amendment and go. I guess, you know, Alderman Fuller, I don't know if you have any thoughts. That was what I was hoping for, was that we could do something along those lines, but I don't know if you want to comment.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to delay this by any means, but again, you know, in the vast majority of the people that actually reached out to me, I heard overwhelmingly that they thought the election was too early in the year because there's going to be a number of people that aren't here. So if we need to get Ward County's approval, that we can push it from the 29th into June at some point, I would like to see that done if we can't do it by amendment here tonight, before we move to approve this.
And my concern with just approving an amendment to the resolution is it would contemplate still passing the resolution. So if the council passed a resolution scheduling a special election for June 10th, and the county wouldn't be available, we'd have to then return with the item anyways to make those amendments, so, which we can do.
Would that be easier though than delaying it? I mean, what are the chances that the county comes back and actually says, no, we're not going to help you on June 10th? There shouldn't be anything else going on, I wouldn't think.
That I don't know, I wasn't the contact for the county.
It was for the county, yes. We did that on the park stand, and we just threw out that April 29th date as a goal for us, but we can be in contact with them as early as tomorrow.
Ellie, do you have any issues if we table this until December 2nd, our first meeting in December?
You know, Mr. Mayor and council members, we would like to get this going as soon as possible to get the word out to the people, but that's the ball's in your guys' court right now.
I guess what I'm looking at, I mean, we're contemplating changing the date with an amendment that you haven't had the opportunity to discuss with your board. So if we pass the amendment, that, you know, so I want your board to be able to discuss.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, can you see kind of the yin and yang, so to speak, that we're kind of dealing with here? So.
Yep. So a question to the city attorney again: would we be able to pass our side tonight, subject to the approval of the Minot Park Board and Ward County to administer the election? And if either one of those breaks down, it's just back on December 2nd again. Would be my thought.
We could do that. If the resolution is passed though, then if it's going to be amended, it would then have to be amended at the next meeting date.
So can we pass item 1 and item 3 and table item 2 until the next meeting?
Yes, you could certainly do that.
I mean, which would approve the ordinance on the first reading, and approve the attached ballot language.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing in question would be the date.
Yep.
Is that something you're comfortable with?
Yeah, and then we actually have our board meeting tomorrow night,
Okay,
so.
go ahead.
The only thing I'd point out, and maybe this is intentional, when you approve the ballot measure, it won't address the concerns Alderman Fuller brought up about the property tax relief. And so if you approve the ballot language tonight, I mean, I guess it's always amendable in the future, but that language is outlined in the ballot language.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Lisa.
In response to that, in response to Alderman Fuller, while I think that is a concern, certainly, I mean, it's something that needs to be addressed, I think that falls on the park board, and I think it falls on the voters to determine if they are comfortable with the way that the ballot is written. I don't think that's our responsibility.
Mike?
If I could add to that, I agree completely, and I think actually it's a step further. They're answerable to the people directly. So they'll face reelection, they get to face that question as it goes, and the people will make that decision. So my thought would be the date is within our purview. That is something that we, because we actually call the election, we can direct that, but I think that's their side.
Mark?
So, Mr. Mayor, do we need a motion to pass 1 and 3, or amend the motion to pass?
I don't know that we need another motion. The motion on the floor would be Alderman Blessum's motion to amend the resolution to set an election date of Tuesday, June 10th, subject to park and.
I never got a
I
second.
don't know that we did, because I don't think that actually came to a motion. I know we didn't end up with a second, so I think we're still on
Okay,
the
if
main
there was,
motion.
okay, if there's no
Yeah.
second, then the main motion
So we're still on the main
stands.
motion.
So are we're on the main motion? Is there, I would entertain an amendment to pull 2?
Yeah, let's, I'll make the motion then to pull 2. We can approve 1 and 3, and pull 2, looking for approval on June 10th from the park board and from the county.
So we have a motion, is an amendment and a do we have a second?
Second.
We have an amendment and a second. Is there any further discussion?
So, Mr. Mayor, I'll just
ahead.
reiterate one more time. Steph, is there, because again, this may be resolved by this time tomorrow night,
Right.
right? Because they've got their meeting and we hopefully can get a hold of the county tomorrow. Is there any value to you guys, Ellie, in just having us done tonight pending those two items? Does that help you, or are you fine with the second?
I mean, I would say if we can get it going, that would be best for the Minot Park District, but whatever you guys feel most comfortable with.
So we have an amendment. Any further discussion?
So
What's that?
Did we have a?
Blessing was the second.
Blessing was a second, yes.
real quick then, and just let me understand, Mike, for you. So are you saying that we approve all three of them tonight, just with the date change? And if they get them approved by the county and by their board, we're good to go and nobody needs to talk about it again?
Yeah, that's the question that I've got. Now, that's not the motion that's on the floor, but that, I just wanted to contemplate that one last time, because again, in 24 hours, she may have both answers.
So let me say this, Steph, is that doable if we did that? Because if we can do that and help them out a little bit, I will rescind my motion to approve 1 and 2, and we can approve it all subject to their date.
It can be approved subject to the date. I just don't have it within my knowledge that the county is able to assist us on that. So there may be an alternate date proposed, and we may be back here.
I see we have Mr. Lakefield to provide some input. Dave?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I just wanted to point out that the election date is included in the ordinance, so that would need to be modified as well.
So
Would
then,
would your amendment include changing the ordinance? Changing the language in the ordinance?
well, I would think it
Well,
would
you'd
have
have
to.
to
It
table
would
it,
have
wouldn't
to.
you?
I mean, if unless we're going to table all of it or approve all of it with the, like Mike had said, with the subject date being the only holdup, doesn't that make sense to do it that way? Yeah. So I'll rescind my original amendment to the motion, that we just approve 1 and 2, and make the motion that we approve all three of them, changing the date in both the ordinance and the part 2 of the resolution to June 10th. And if it's approved by the county and the park board, they're good to go and don't need to come back to us.
Okay, your first move was to rescind. Are you okay? Is there any objection from the council? So that's been rescinded, and your motion is to go through just changing the date to June 10th.
In both the ordinance and the resolution, yes.
Second.
And we have a second. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
So we have a motion and a second, or is that an amendment?
I believe it's a motion to amend
To the original
Alderwoman
motion.
Olson's main motion.
Correct.
So it's an amendment.
This is
Yes.
an amendment to the original motion.
Okay. Any further discussion on the amendment that's on the floor? We have an amendment and a second. Please record your vote.
The motion to amend passes with a 6-1 vote with a dissent from Alderman Samuelson.
Moving on to the original motion, is there any further discussion? As amended. Any further discussion? Scott?
So I'd brought up before on another sales tax issue, and I just want to bring it up again. The citizens of Minot are tapped out. We've got nothing left. I think there's other ways to figure out how to build this if this is what the community wants. And I know it's been brought up here that the voters are the ones that that need to decide this. And although I agree with that, I have not had one member of the community, other than the park board and the council members up here, that have said that. I've not talked to one person that wants this on a ballot to even vote on it. I believe it'll have a negative impact on our economic development, our sales, which on sales tax on everything else. And as Alderman Fuller said, the sunsetting of the property tax levy reduction, I think it should be permanent. The reason why I say that is because every sunsetting sales tax or property tax or anything that is said never comes because it's voted on again. And in 5 years, we could have a completely different park board that isn't gonna wanna reduce our property tax mill levies. So I can't support it.
Rob?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And to Scott's point, one of the things I heard over and over about that was, you know, if we approve this sales tax right now, and in 5 years, they want to do, the park board as a whole wants to do something more, and we won't give them another half-cent sales tax, their only way that they can raise any more funds is to go back to property tax. And so people were very, very concerned about that when they were reaching out to me, so.
Mr. Mayor?
Mike?
Just shortly, you know, in general terms, I've spoke many times along the same lines that these guys have. In this particular case, that portion of it isn't our decision before us. Our decision before us is a statutory one that requires us to help them put it on the ballot in their capacity as elected officials on the park board. And so my vote will be yes, simply for that reason, to make sure that they get that put there and that they face the voters on the next ballot as well. Thanks.
Any further discussion? Paul?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with, I guess, a lot of what everyone said, as far as, you know, the fears of replacing revenue with sales tax and property tax coming back into the equation at a certain time. But like was stated, that's their role. That's why they're elected. They're elected to make those decisions when the economy does what it does. We've heard things from Ellie talk about maintenance mode. You know, if this doesn't go through, and some would say, is that such a bad thing? You know, when I was growing up, my dad would say, if you can't afford it right now, you probably don't need it. But I will speak as a citizen for a minute and say that I think our parks are behind. I think our parks could do a lot better. And I think this allows them that opportunity to do more for our community and the people that come into our community. And again, that's me speaking as a citizen. But my role here is, to Alderman Blessam's point, this is just to help them out as a statutory requirement for them to get it on the ballot, and this is the best solution for the issues that Parks feels they're facing. However, I will say, when you take the burden off of property tax owners and we put it to sales tax, you do place a burden to pay for these things on people that come into our community. So, and I'll just reiterate this, not as any kind of warning or any kind of philosophy, but working in my time on Visit Minot and as the liaison to that board, there needs to be an emphasis put on bringing people into our community that are going to help not only bolster the sales tax revenue for this half cent, but for the city. That's why I think this can be a benefit. And it will be up to the voters to decide. And again, I'm excited to give them that opportunity and have this role. So just wanted to share those comments.
Thank you. Steph?
So this is sorry, Dave, I'm going to put you on the spot here, but I'm just looking back at the ordinance, and paragraph 2 has an implementation date for the ordinance amendments. And as contemplated in the current approved draft of the ordinance, the election is to be held on June 10th, and then the amendments are to be implemented on July 1st. Original draft was October 1st, so now that implementation time between the election and the date that the tax will start being collected has been compressed. Is that something that's feasible? I know they typically try to look to begin that at the beginning of a quarter.
Mr. Mayor, City Attorney, you're correct. The State Tax Commissioner's Office will collect the tax for the city, and they will begin that at the beginning of a quarter, and I believe it's 60 days lead time that they need to get that set up. So if we push it back to June 10th, it would not be able to begin on July 1st, which would be the beginning of the third quarter, so it would have to wait until the beginning of the fourth quarter.
And is the beginning of the fourth quarter October 1st?
October 1st.
Okay.
So do we need an amendment to fix that? Is it in the draft?
It Yes, so that's what was in the draft that was, so my recommendation would be to submit an amendment, knowing that I know the Park District had July 1st as an implementation date on its mind. So, I mean, a motion to reconsider, it's for the council to kind of consider, but that turnaround time is just not going to be enough lead time for the state tax department to start doing that collection.
So, Mr. Mayor, I'll bring an amendment to the main motion to move the implementation date to October 1.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? We have an amendment and a second. Any further discussion? Any further? Seeing none, please record your vote.
That motion passed unanimously.
Okay, moving on to any further discussion on the motion as amended twice? Is there any further discussion? Lisa?
Only one comment. And I hope that by moving the date, I hope more people do come out and vote. But I was trying to find the official number in Ward County. I wasn't able to. Statewide turnout in the primary election in 2024, 20% of our voters voted. So here's their opportunity to vote. So I hope they do.
Any further? Seeing no further discussion, please record your vote on the amended motion.
Motion passed 6-1 with dissents from Alderman Samuelson.
Moving on to item 8 on the agenda, that's personal appearances. Now is an opportunity for those who wish to step forward to address the council. I would just ask that you keep your comments down to 5 minutes out of respect for others who wish to address the council.
Hi, my name is Joan Hawbaker. I live here in Minot, and I want to address two things, but they do connect at the end. One, I'm sure everybody knows that we have 2 libraries here in town. So we're paying 2 staffs. I mean, okay, one of them is a county, but we all live in the same county. So we are still paying 2 staffs, utilities, mortgage, or whatever to pay for the facility. I've been in both facilities. They have the same books. We're also paying for 2 subscriptions to the Minot Daily News. My thought is, and I know we've got some people here that are trying to decrease our costs, why can't we combine the 2 and have a city-county library? Now, I was just told tonight that the council at the time, about 8 years ago, voted on this and wanted to do it, so maybe I also need to go to the county, but I did not know that at the time. Okay, so I will do that. But I want to put it in your ears too, that I think this would be a really good idea. Is it going to save us $200,000 a year, $500,000? I don't know, but little bit by little bit, I think will help. The second thing is I was here at the Thursday's special meeting, and while I fully agree that the police department probably does need some revamping and it needs to be made secure and safe for them and the public, one thing that was brought up was building 2 buildings up above for special ops and for a courthouse or courts. Isn't one larger building? Now, I've never been in construction. I'm medical, not construction, but building one larger building versus 2 smaller buildings, wouldn't that be less expensive? And number 2, if we can combine the libraries, take the larger one, which is the city one, we've opened up some space in the county building. Can we take some offices from the courthouse, move it over to what was the county library, open up some room there, and make that have the courthouse, or the courts move into the courthouse and have all of the courts in the same spot? So that's just Some things I've been thinking about over the last several days, since somebody reminded me that we do have 2 libraries right here in the city, less than 2 miles apart. And so we do, or are going to now have a Department of Government Efficiency federally. Maybe we need to start looking at some things locally, and whether we need some other people getting involved too, to be part of a government efficiency department for short term. That's just some suggestions I've come up with.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes,
if I
Lisa.
may, thank you for the question about the library. You got a few questions in there, but I'd like to just respond briefly. It was, I believe, in 2018. I'd have to look back. My year might not be quite accurate, but I did chair the library merger committee, and so you have to step back a little bit and understand that libraries are governed by a library board of trustees, and so they make the initial decisions to even look into a merger process. And so for a year, we met, had representatives from the city, from the county, had all kinds of discussions, looked at the layout of both of the buildings, the services that are provided not only within the city and within the county, and came up with a plan. And so at that point, we brought the plan first to the city council to say, would you approve this being put on a special election? Because the voters need to approve that. It can't be done at the city level or the county commission level. And so unanimously, the city council voted yes. And what we would have seen at that time was a savings of about $600,000 over 10 years, an improvement to the services provided to the county residents, improved bookmobile services, a larger place or a larger library in Kenmare. It would have closed this off, this library in Minot, but it would have improved the services in Kenmare. And there would have been in-town bookmobile services. So it seemed logical to make, to allow the voters to look at that. And the very next day, the same request needed to go to the county commission, and it died 3-2 at the county commission. So it could not be put on a special election, and that's where it ended. So that process has been gone through, if I remember correctly, about 5 times over the last 40 to 45 years. And we're still in the same spot. So, whether it's worth another conversation, perhaps it is, but that's where it ended the last time that the work that was put into it. And then just one other little note, city residents are not charged county library taxes. So we don't, for a lot of community services that we have, or county services that we have, we do pay for those county services, but city residents don't pay for county library services.
Thank you.
Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Joan, when there's an election in 2 years, so visit Michaela to get a sign-up sheet, and I'll sign your petition to run for city council. I like your ideas, so.
Now is your opportunity to come forward to address the council. Bruce, I think we'll catch you next, Bruce. Hang on one second, sir. Last call for public appearances or personal appearances. Seeing none, we will move on to item 9 on the agenda, and that is miscellaneous and discussion. Item 9.1, Bruce Walker, Park South 2, Lura. Bruce.
Good evening. My name is Bruce Walker. I live at 1415 10th Street Southwest in Minot. And I'm a partner in the Essential Living, which is a nonprofit for housing in Minot. Part of the benefit for the nonprofits in building is to have a tax break for a certain portion. And there's I think you should have received a copy of the, it's called the LURA. You had an opportunity maybe to read through that and see what that talks about. But basically what it says is if the property is rented to low to moderate income people, renters, and if it follows the other guidelines by the state, under the Internal Revenue Code, the Century Code 57020843, it'll qualify for the, and I believe that, I don't know if there's been others that have come before the city before on this. This is maybe a first time. And I know that every rental in Minot that has it beneficial. I've talked to a couple other owners too.
I am unaware. Not in my time. I don't know if.
None has come before you, right?
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, I would request that the city assessor come up. Maybe he has
I
some
can't hear
more.
you very good. I'm sorry.
I would ask that the city assessor come up and he can provide some, not only history on this, but what the potential impacts would be on other projects should the council elect to approve this tonight.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, this property and aspect, the land use restriction agreement that is being requested here normally happens at the state level. When these properties go through for low to moderate income housing, they're granted usually those benefits through the state of North Dakota, and they implement their land use restriction agreement, also known as a LURA, at that time. Because this property went through our NDR program, received federal funding, we do have restrictions on the property through a contract with that, but there is no recorded deed restriction on the property, which in order for me to grant an exemption for the property, that would have to be put in place. In the past, we have not had any of these other land use restriction agreements put in place for properties because that has been handled at the state level, and they are the ones receiving the funding through the state. There has been conversations, Mayor Ross, myself, Mr. Lakefield have sat down with other members of the community seeking other ways to provide tax incentives for providing additional low to moderate income housing. And this could be a possibility for a tool for the city council to use to provide that to its citizens. Ultimately, as a city assessor, I don't have an opinion on this. I got to be unbiased in my processes here, but this property was discovered during our annual review of exempt properties. We go through about 25% of our exempt properties yearly, reviewing to make sure they do have the proper documentation on hand. In the review, the original plat of the property, Social Park Apartments, has a land use restriction agreement with the state of North Dakota because it did receive funding through the state of North Dakota. When they subdivided this property out to create the townhomes, that land use restriction agreement stays with the apartments, and it did not follow suit with the townhomes themselves. So in order for the property owner to receive the incentives, tax-based incentives for a payment in lieu of taxes, there would need to be a recorded land use restriction agreement on the property, which they have provided to city staff and city attorney for review on this. Ultimately, what Mr. Walker here is seeking today and city staff is what direction the council wishes to proceed on issuing a land use restriction agreement for the property.
Do we have any further questions? Rob?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ryan, so it sounds like just kind of a weird snafu happened when they replatted it, and it just, the LURA just stuck with the apartments rather than moving over to the townhomes. Do you see any reason why the state would reject this if we send it in to them?
Yeah, I guess you could say, a weird snafu. That's a good term for it. Yes, basically the proper documentation wasn't followed through on the property owner. They're here requesting that. We as a city have already provided them that incentive base for the deed restriction. Ultimately, in order for my office to grant that exemption, I need the state to tell me that I can grant the exemption. And that's what they're asking for, is that documentation submitted to the state. State North Dakota Housing and Finance Agency will then tell me that I can grant the exemption on the property.
Okay, thank you.
Mark?
Mr. Mayor, thank you. And, it appears that, as Alderman Fuller pointed out, this was something that was simply an omission of process. It was the intention of all parties involved in the original deal that the LURA be in place. And so I guess I would move that we grant that to Mr. Walker and his group.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion. Mike, I think you wanted to.
So I maybe to the city manager, maybe to Ryan, is there any danger here? Is there any precedent we're setting for anything future-wise? Is this truly a one-off, fix the paperwork and we're good? Or are we setting ourselves up for something that we're not intending?
Mayor Ross, Alderman Blessum, every property owner has a right to apply for a tax exemption in the state. Whether or not they qualify for it or not, that goes through our channels of reviewing. The specific exemption that they're applying for is subsection 43 here, and there are certain requirements that property owners have to meet in order to receive that. This, in my opinion, does open the door for other property owners to make that same request to the council. But you as the council have to weigh your pros and cons of what benefits this provides for future properties that may be seeking that assistance from the council.
Mark?
So, if I may, so it is a case-by-case basis, and presumably the circumstances in this case with what has happened preceding tonight is pretty clear, and in a future case, there might not be those same circumstances. Is that fair? Is that a fair statement?
Mayor Ross, Alderman Janser, that is correct. Ultimately, if we have any future applicants for this certain specific centric code, they do have to come to the council requesting that land use restriction agreement, unless they've gone through the avenues with the state to receive their lure through the state for their financing.
Any further discussion? So we have a motion on the floor and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, please record your vote.
Motion passed unanimously.
Moving on to item 10 on the agenda, that's the...
Mr. Mayor, may I
Yes.
interrupt you? Before you go on, I'd like to have one item added to the miscellaneous and discussion items, if that's possible.
Without objection? Seeing none?
All right, thank you. So I was unable to attend the last city council meeting where some options were being considered for the police department, and what a presentation had been done by EAPC, and council had good discussion related to that. And I watched the meeting later, so I was aware of all of the discussion that occurred. And at one point, Alderman Blessum said, "We have not heard from Alderwoman Olson." And I had indicated in an email to all my colleagues that I did have a plan. And it's kind of a high-level plan, and I certainly will never pretend to be an engineer or a developer or even understand, what the potential costs of this would be. But one idea that I've had is that we own property. So we would not have to purchase more property if we can use the property that we have. And we have a parking garage right next door that has not been built up on and has the potential to have building on it. And so I think that the direction to city staff was to look at what options we could see with 12 million, 25 million, and 40 million. Well, I would like part of that process to be considering building on that parking garage. It is a building that we own. It's near City Hall. It's downtown. What options would be there? I know that it would not be able to accommodate all of the needs that the police department needs, but it could possibly accommodate the administrative needs, the customer service needs. And then we would still own the current police department old City Hall building, which could potentially be used for special operations and could potentially be used for municipal court. So that's kind of my big level thought process, and because I wasn't able to be here, I wanted to share that with you, and maybe that gives city staff even just a tish more direction as to ideas that they could bring back to us.
Any questions of Lisa?
Mr.
Mike?
Mayor, not so much that. I think that was very clear. Do we want a motion to give that directive to the city manager to bring that along with the other options that we've talked about?
I would make that in the form of a motion.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second for further direction on the future of the police department. Any further discussion?
Yes, no, I'm just kidding.
Any further discussion? I kind of stalled there to give Kayla some time. Scott?
I think it's probably a really good idea. I just don't think we can afford a new police station. I really think we have to stick with what we have and do the best we can with that. And to then have two different facilities, again, just, it doesn't make sense to me. Doesn't mean it can't be looked at. I would rather see what comes out of the others first before we looked at that area, because then again, we're talking two different buildings. Just my thoughts.
Any further discussion? Paul?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and maybe for Harold, I mean, is there a cost associated with looking at this option from our consultants? What turnaround time?
I guess staff would have to look at and work on. I mean, ultimately, EAPC has met their scope of service with their initial space needs analysis. So they're not going to work pro bono exploring a whole bunch of options for us. Yeah, I don't have a direct answer for that. I'm trying to weigh between what staff can do on its own versus what we would need EAPC's help for.
Well, I guess maybe just to, would that come before that is looked into and there is a cost associated with that? Would that come back to this body to vote on that?
If we were to look at having any more costs to EAPC, yes, I would recommend that come forward with a budget and a proposal for that and what those costs would be to look at those alternatives as directed by council.
So I can continue. So Lisa, would your intent be just to do this in-house with engineering staff and our internal engineering estimates at this point?
Thank you, Alderman Pittner. I guess I assumed that we would probably already be incurring some additional costs with the APC because they have completed the work that we asked them to complete. So I guess I was assuming that there probably would be a cost no matter what.
Mr. Mayor, I guess my question is, Alderman Blessam, we asked him to bring back alternatives at 12 million, 25 million, and 40 million. Is that part of the original scope, or is that new and incurred costs? Because if that's new incurred costs, I would say we could put Alderman Olson's request in there as well.
I would say those would be new incurred costs. Staff has not had any conversations with the APC yet. They presented the results of that study to the council twice now. Most recently, Thursday of last week at the request of staff. I believe that fell within the scope of their, they were just presenting the report that they'd already done in a more executive summary format. Looking at what could be taken off and what can meet those cost thresholds that the council gave directive last time, and now the new potential motion from Alderwoman Olson, that's new additional work. And again, staff has not had a conversation with the APC as far as what the cost of that would be. I don't know that we don't have an architect on staff to assess the feasibility of building a police station on top of the parking garages, or even assessing what the layout would look like at the $12,000, $20,000, $40,000 thresholds. So staff is gonna have to work on that and come up with a way to how we're gonna assess that, what the cost of that's gonna be, and bring that back to council on whether or not you're willing to pay for that and bring those alternatives and those issues to the table.
Rob?
Well, I appreciate that, Harold. So I guess if we're gonna ask them to do Mike's alternatives and give us those, I would say we need to include Alderwoman Olson's in there as well. So if we're gonna go to EAPC and say, hey, we wanna see these three alternatives at 12, 25, and 40, we'd also like to see what it would cost to build on top of the parking garages and if it's even feasible.
Mr. Mayor, just one thing, and we've thrown this back and forth. I just want to clarify what my motion was last Thursday to be very clear, because it was 12 and 25, but the last motion was to do the full department without the two outbuildings. And so just to be clear on what we're talking about, that was around 40. But I think Lisa, if I'm right, your motion is to add this as another fourth alternative.
Yes.
And to be evaluated, as Harold said, and likely back to council to authorize the work.
I think as a point of reference, Mr. Mayor, and finance will correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it was around $100,000 to do the complete study. And I don't think we're looking at that at this point. So, although it was done 2 years ago. I think we have a framework of what it could potentially cost us. And yes, we need to save money, but I think it would be a good investment to see what the best options for us are when we're looking at a multi-million-dollar project.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, we have a motion and a second on the floor. Please record your vote.
Motion passed 6-1 with a dissent from Alderman Pittner.
Moving on to item number 10 on the agenda, that's liaison reports. We'll start with Lisa.
I'll pull mine up. All right. On October 23rd, I attended the Service Basin Planning Council annual meeting. At that meeting, updates of the past year's projects were shared with those in attendance. A presentation from Maggie Bakken, who is the director of the DCB Downtown Minot Campus, was shared, and she highlighted the opening of the dental assisting program, which is, all of that has come from work that's been done on this dais. And the second presenter was Rebecca Undum, who is the director of Growing Small Towns. And she had a lot of encouraging comments to make, but one of her biggest reminders was to sincerely make everyone feel welcome in the decision-making process. On October 24th, I attended the Central Dakota MPO meeting. On October 31st, I attended the Service Basin Loan Review Committee, and I know that this came up in Alderman Blessum's committee recently. So that committee does the work much like a bank loan program. So there are applications that are made, there's financial information and personal appearances that all come part of that decision-making process, and the committee makes recommendations on whether or not those gap financing loans will be issued. And then on November 7th, the Committee on Childcare met. We'd had about a 6-month hiatus, but we are back meeting. We discussed goals moving forward, and Mayor Ross joined the meeting with us and gave us some insight on childcare and early childhood education that he had learned while attending the conference earlier this fall. That's my report.
Mike.
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, let's see, a little over a week ago on, what would it have been? The 8th of November, we had our first Economic Development Plan Review Committee meeting. It was a good intro. We got things started, had presentations from North Dakota Commerce, MAC, EDC, and the Service Basin Planning Council. We meet again this Friday, and we'll continue that work, and that'll be ongoing for the next few months. This week, we will have presentations from North Dakota Workforce, as well as, the other one flew out of my head now. And that one was pending anyway. So the other thing I'll just mention is that we will continue our discussions around what does economic development success look like? And I think that's going to be one of the keys to our discussions. My other liaison report is from the Minot Commission on Aging. We had a meeting this past Friday. At that meeting, we passed their budget for 2025, which was a nice milestone. And I think Roger and his team did a fabulous job there. And I wanted to call out one thing that I thought was particularly important in that, and that's that he presented and we approved a wage increase program that did exactly the things that we've talked about. It identified among all of their staff those that are performing at different levels and determined which of those should receive COLA rates plus 1%, plus 2%, and plus 3%. And they implemented that plan, had a 5% roughly across the board increase. That's what it averaged out to, and that worked out very well for them, and I commended them for that because, again, I think that's the mentality that we want to take a look at as we go forward here at the city. And so the Commission on Aging, with the roughly $155,000 that we move over there, along with all the other grants and other programs that they bring in, does incredible work in our community to make sure that seniors are fed, that there's a community there that works well, and then that their health needs are met, and particularly foot care. So a great budget, and I'm really proud of the work that they're doing there.
Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be pinch hitting for Alderwoman Olson at the MPO meeting this week. Our Visit Minot board meeting is later this week as well. Our Renaissance Zone Board meeting was canceled. Had a couple meetings with staff and a local contractor developer on ways to improve permitting process. And I think some good things came out of that. Some efficiencies were found. Again, the Economic Development Review Committee with Alderman Blessum, as well as the Alcohol Ordinance Review and Rewrite Committee that I chair, met last week, and we had some good discussion, and work continues, and hope to have some recommendations before this body by the end of the year.
Thank you, Paul. Scott?
Last Thursday, Ward County Planning and Zoning met working on their zoning ordinance. It was an evening that was probably the most headway we've made the whole time along, so it's moving forward.
Mark?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. MPO has kind of been covered, meeting this coming Thursday. The City County School District Park District Liaison Committee did not meet since our last meeting, so.
Okay. Rob?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, as Scott said, we had a special Ward County Planning Commission meeting last Thursday. I think we got through 10 pages or something like that last week, so it was a barn burner for sure. I was unable to attend the Ward County Emergency Management Committee meeting, and then our Library Committee and our regular Ward County Planning Commission is this Thursday, so.
And my report was included in the mayor's report. With that, moving on to the final item on the agenda, that's adjournment. Is there a motion?
So moved.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Adjourned. Good meeting.